Good afternoon and welcome to last Wednesday lunch at the Zuckerman Museum of Art. Today we're going to be hearing from Cynthia Nourse Thompson, our Director of Curatorial Affairs and Associate Professor in the School of Art and Design. Cynthia comes to us with an undergraduate degree in printmaking from the Maryland Institute College of Art and an MFA from Rutgers University. She's worked previously at Harlan and Weaver, Intaglio, Dudinay Paper Mill, and the Brodsky Center. She's also served as a curator at Walton Art Center, University of Arkansas, and Memphis College of Art. Today, she'll be presenting research conducted in June during a summer fellowship at Winterthur Museum, Garden and Library in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you so much, Cynthia, for sharing today.
Thank you, Elizabeth, that wonderful introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. Can you see that?
Yes.
Great. So yes, Elizabeth is correct. I am going to be talking about my time as a scholar for a research fellowship that I was awarded at Winterthur Museum, Gardens and Library, and how that has influenced really all aspects of the current exhibitions that are on view. I did want to note that I will be giving a talk on October 14th at the museum at 7 p.m. regarding the other exhibition, which is titled The Labor of Remembrance. It's print and textile works by Louise Bourgeois. And I encourage all of you to attend that lecture because I will be showing images of the archive and of her home and the interior, which is not allowed to go public. So it will be a really wonderful experience and a unique look at the inner workings of Louise and really her interior home space, her mind, all of it. So I encourage you to attend that. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the background of this exhibition that I formed called This Mortal Coil, which opens this Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Yellow was my maternal grandmother's favorite color. Since my early youth, it has been associated with her and that which surrounded her. This hue, like that used in a child's crayon drawing of the sun, recalls lazy extended days spent swimming in the lake behind her home, climbing the sprawling citrus trees within the grove of her front yard, and walking on thick plastic carpet runners, which paved her home's interior surface, as no individual was to walk on a floor destined to remain without blemish, just like the splendid ripe oranges and lemons seen from each window. Yellow reminds me of her face colored by the Florida sun, with a customary smile matching her demeanor, perfectly painted, and her signature coral lipstick would left an impression whenever she kissed you. Upon the conclusion of her of her life at the age of 94, I stood in emotional isolation, adjacent to a casket adorned in a lush array of yellow roses, masking the agony of her last days. It is through this sense of lamentation and a cavernous longing for that which was that my internal lexicon of yellow has been forever altered. My grandmother was yellow to me. Sadly, those remembrances have been eclipsed, and this pigment is now a memorial to anguish, regret, loss, and elicits sentimental yearnings for lost moments. The manifold themes of suffering and loss are pervasive in the canon of art history, as can be observed here in Donatello's sculpture of the Penitent Magdalene, also among the numerous paintings of the Renaissance period that depict biblical narratives of unburdened sorrow, as well as in the work of the Pre-Raphaelites, revealing the tragic relationship between love and death, as presented here, and Sir John Everett Malay's forlorn image of Ophelia. The unspeakable pain and terror witnessed in Goya's Disasters of War etchings, as well as in the agony and woe inscribed in contemporary works seen here, such as The Morgue, which is a series of photographs by Andres Serrano. Moreover, the themes of devastation and anguish are globally poignant and ever relevant through the grim realities and human struggles currently confronting populations and their correlation to loss, injustice, forgiveness, illness, and mortality. As we now enter the third decade of the 21st century, a call for reflection and restoration resides at its threshold. Significant changes and challenges in our cultural climate have had a relevant impact on the practice of art making and also to craft, prompting artists to return to hand making as a particular response and remedy to suffering. David McFadden, former chief curator of the Museum of Arts and Design, states, quote, "Materiality in its many forms and an intense devotion to the making of things has renovated and re-energized the world of handcraft, replacing the world of conceptual art with the new materiality of our time." Quote, "The practice of making, of celebrating the work of the artist's hand, specifically the return to the physicalness of creating across disciplines, is wholly present in this exhibition. The ideology of craft collectively employs active and investigative methodologies alongside obsessive and devout tendencies to facilitate one's redemption. This impassioned approach to making by hand, with the inherent connection of ritual and process to that of materiality and craft, draws one to consider the ability of compulsive labor and also devotion to serve as a remedy for grief, which is something I think we all need to reflect upon and have turned to, especially during the past year and a half. So the two exhibitions that I curated, This Mortal Coil and The Labor of Remembrance, are interrelated and in dialogue, seeking to mitigate emotional suffering and corporal pain. A collection of work by 17 prominent contemporary artists introduce a visual dialogue that is strikingly raw and at the surface of our emotional armature, one which most individuals work diligently to prevent illuminating. This imposing presence of fear and loss is compounded by images which, while beautiful, are laden with sorrow and despondency. Many of the works in the exhibitions are at times presented through a despairing lens, pleading empathy, suffering, and sacrifice as shared universal causes. Moreover, the quiet ferocity of devotion, as presented through craft, materials, and process, provokes one to somatic response beyond exercised humility. Although the artists in this exhibition confront us with fearful depths lurking beneath our exterior, their images beckon us to fathom its darkness and arise to find strength, clarity, and the recognition that without this palpable dimness, light would not exist. Within darkness, there are moments of great beauty and great certainty. And I'm just going to share a few of the images in the exhibition because I do want to tantalize viewers to come in and actually see the show, because to be in the physical presence with the works is very, very moving, and one which I don't think can be clearly conveyed through a slide presentation such as this. But to give you now a little bit of background regarding my research at Winterthur, I'm going to share some images while my colleague and I, David Chiaffi from University of Arkansas, were research and studying at Winterthur. Winterthur is Henry Francis DuPont's home, and it contains his collection of American furniture and decorative arts. It's wonderfully expansive, and our premise was to immerse ourselves in the mourning culture and objects that are imbued with history, grief, and anguish. And from that, we were going to create an artist's book, a series of prints, and a bespoke typeface. David is a graphic designer who happens to be designing the catalog for the two exhibitions, and he is also a typographer, and we collaborate quite often on artist books together. And so I'm going to present information here that you'll see how it's going to coalesce in the catalog for both of the exhibitions, which I'm really excited about. The catalog for me really is more of an artist book, and I'm very excited that it will be released in October. So picture here is Ferrante Imperato's pictorial representation of a Renaissance humanist's displayed natural history research collection. We all know the Wonder Cabinet, the Cabinet of Curiosities. These architectural installations combine specimens, diagrams, and illustrations from many disciplines. And the metaphorical conveyance of the Wonder Cabinet is achieved by the totality of the Winterthur Museum, garden, and library environments, which you will see, and serve to recontextualize the visual identities of objects that we researched through the production of, again, an artist book and custom typeface. But the most important thing for me was that it was very serendipitous that this aligned perfectly with my research for these two upcoming exhibitions, and the fact that they are dealing with loss, anguish, mortality, mourning culture. So all of these things really aligned for us to continue to do our research for our own work, but it fully supplemented and informed the exhibition that's on view now and the catalog. So our project converged two professors from the visual arts and graphic design arenas, and we both researched the artifacts, social connotations, and conceptuality concerning vestige, defined as, quote, a surviving memorial or trace of some condition, quality, practice, serving as an indication of its former existence. Such a lens surveyed Winterthur's environments in assembling a narrative in language and imagery to emerge in a later, again, project, the artist book and typeface. So the main themes of interest for us resided within the 18th and 19th centuries and included the decorative arts, objects, ecclesiastical architecture and arts, ephemeral and trade, which you will see, mourning rituals, mourning jewelry, and objects of devotion, including ornament, the ornamental, typography, as well as Owen Jones and Pugin. So we embrace the art of the hand, a respect for the historical, and maintain the relevancy of printed formats as an equally exploratory and commemorative object. So upon entering Winterthur Museum, we are just bombarded with collections and really cabinets of curiosities everywhere. And so I'm just going to go through some amazing images featuring just, I would say, a minutia of what we experienced within the home. Glass objects on display, as well as collections. Also here, butterflies. They had a shell grotto as well. Again, we were focusing on the hand and devotion. So we researched particular samplers, which also led us to a number of mourning samplers as well. So it was wonderful to be immersed in this environment where we really found ourselves falling down a rabbit hole into another rabbit hole into another rabbit hole. And much of our research led us to a place that we didn't really expect for our final project, which we're very, very excited about. And the wonderful thing about this serving as a scholar in this fellowship in particular was that it wasn't necessarily set up for making. So that was a challenge. It was all about the research and gathering and planning for the project to occur later. But here you see the wonderful portraits, the silhouettes, the paper cut portraits. On the left, we have more of the lockets, which again contained hair. Behind them, a locket of a loved one. So we fully took advantage of this to, again, immerse ourselves in mourning culture. And we're surrounded by grief and death and the ephemera related to that. Here they have a wonderful collection of mourning jewelry where deceased loved one's hair was taken and either formed in a beautiful braid behind the locket, or hair was made from it. This also included grinding up hair almost to like a powdered pigment and painting scenes on ivory with it as well. And this was just one of my most favorite pieces. The center cameo image, the brooch that you see, has the hair of Martha and George Washington intertwined together. And to be able to see this piece and to research it was just really incredible. And again, on either side, you have some of the iconic imagery signifying mourning and grief, which is the urn, the plinth, the weeping willows, the tree forms, water in the background, which served as a metaphor for a vehicle to the other side, to the other world. So all of these symbolic and iconic images also have influenced how we are constructing the catalog and also moving forward with our own artist book as well. And this was really beautiful. We were brought up to the special collections area and also the conservation labs where this was the case, the container that held the cameo, the brooch with Martha and George Washington's hair. And so for me, a book artist also, this just really moved me greatly with the fact that once upon opening it, you have the residue on the right side where this object held so dear normally resides, and you have the residue around that. And so the powerful suggestion of both presence and absence in this singular object that I think was maybe 3 inches by 5 inches was just enormous. So the power of all of these wonderful, wonderful artifacts, and again, we sought to expand our knowledge of mourning culture through these, historical and highly emotional objects. Here you have a mourning ring where the deceased, the departed, their date and their name was inscribed upon the ring. Here also on the right, we have a lock of hair. As I mentioned, we were allowed to go into the conservation area, and this was a sampler kit for a salesman for mourning jewelry, which contained all of the examples of the types of product or jewelry that could be made from your deceased loved one's hair. And so they were in the midst of conserving this object, conserving the case. But when one examines it closely, you're just blown away again by the sense of devotion. These bracelets here are made entirely of hair. The case itself was gorgeous as well, with the hand marbled papers, but all of these elements, and here are the examples of brooches or lockets that you could have made. These are all constructed on a very thin oval of ivory. Here you have the Prince of Wales curl on the right, which was very common for that time period. On the left, again, you have these scenes of within the graveyard. You have the urn, you have the plinth, you have the trees that are weeping. Very, very, very beautiful scenes, and so highly, highly detailed. In addition to that, the museum contained a lot of ephemera in their archives. So here's an example of the stationery, mourning stationery that was sent out with announcements of someone's death. The edge just being lined ever so slightly with black. Then you also have, this relates to the hair wreaths that were typically also constructed, although this was crepe. Again, more ephemera. We were able to study and view numerous boxes of these funerary cards or mementos, as well as boxes that were delivered to us where at the funeral parlor, it was one person's single job to note on a note card every single object that would go into a casket when someone was buried. So the history that we were a part of and immersed in was just extremely moving. And again, as a printmaker and a book artist and letterpress printer, all of this type of typography and the way in which these were printed, all of this to me was just so, so eloquent. Working with the silhouettes here, just beautiful. This also included needlework, which is subsequently going to be part of well, it's part of the Louise Bourgeois exhibition now. When you come to see the shows, you'll see. But these mourning scenes were also depicted in tapestries as well as textiles. And this, upon first glance, appears to be a drawing or an etching or an engraving when it's actually all done by hand with needlework. So the entire knoll, the grassy area that you see here for the graveyard, all of the little stippling are individual knots, and every single element within this is created with thread and stitching. So again, this sense of devotion. Here's more of these memorial cards. And again, the ability to be in the conservation labs above the museum, above the library, and see what the head conservation workers were working on at the time. And this, again, this imagery conveyed through another means, through this colorful, beautiful, iridescent gold thread. And this piece, it doesn't translate well in these images, but the luminosity and the idea of illumination in this piece was so, so strong. And one of the unique things about this serving as scholars here was the fact that we did have 24-hour access to the library and the archives. So we took full advantage of that as well as being on the ground. So earlier I mentioned about the museum being a museum, garden, and library. The grounds are enormous, and this is an example of the reflecting pool that at one time was a swimming pool. So the ideas, again, working with mourning, with reflection, with death, kind of surrounded us. And these gardens here were a place that we kind of sought respite in and would go to discuss the things that we were working on during the day. But all of these experiences, even the trees that were surrounding us at the gardens, many which were the willows or the cypress, again, reiterated all of the imagery and the books and the monographs that we were studying from. So I feel like we, in totality, the experience of being there really, really affected us greatly. And I feel like we took advantage of every single aspect of this research fellowship and enjoyed it thoroughly. And this image I'll end with, I believe, from the time at Winterthur was a gorgeous morning sampler. Again, all done by hand and just really, really beautiful, beautiful piece. So this is another image. They also had a collection of Currier and Ives prints, and they are most known for their work with landscape, but they also printed these, I would say, memorial ephemera prints where the prints would feature these sort of iconic images with the trees, the urn, the plinth, and they could be personalized on the plaque in the center. Again, this is another detail of one of the images where the hair was ground up to a pigment and painted with on the ivory, as well as glued down, you can see in the tree forms. And the detail in these is just exceptional. So now moving forward to discuss how this sort of, I think, solidifies and comes together and has influenced the exhibitions. I felt it was very timely for this exhibition to be placed in our galleries. One, because the 20th anniversary of 9/11 is coming up. I think that we have all had a difficult 2 years, and I'm hoping that this exhibition will serve as a reflection for people coming here to pause and reflect on what we've all been through in the past year, and how one can mourn and move forward from that, how loss and anguish reside within us, how they mark us or how they leave us and how we move on. But I'm really hoping for viewers to be moved by this. So David, again, my colleague on this fellowship, developed a system in which an algorithm was utilized to extract a set of colors, which you'll see right here, to produce visual and mathematical data regarding each work within the exhibition. And considering these outcomes, a taxonomy was developed which conveys color ways of each artist's work, while also acknowledging that emotions such as despair, anguish, and mourning can be expressed beyond that of black, the color we all typically associate with mourning. And this pattern set of colors and algorithm was based off of the image of Ophelia that I showed you previously, and that will appear in the catalog. And it was taken from the colors and the color set in the water, reflecting the flowers. And so this idea of reflection, of mourning, of sorrow. And so each work in the exhibition has this system applied to it. And so essentially it's providing a reading of grief and emotion for each work, which I think is really unique. There's a little bit more to the catalog than that. And I think you'll be really pleased. I'm very excited about its production. Again, it's going to be released in October. But these are just a few of the images from the exhibition. And this is a piece by Janine Antoni. So gorgeous. So in this piece, I was thinking a lot about, again, the idea of loss. My father passed away not too long ago. We had to remove him from life support. To me, this reminded me of this idea of how I wish I could have been there to, hold my head to his chest and listen to his heart one more time. This to me relates to the image of the woman mourning on the cameo that I previously showed, in a sense that here you have a plinth also, a riser. You have a pillow which is trying to comfort the torso, while at the same time the chest is impressing upon the torso, trying to hear either the last breath or the heartbeat. So this idea of loss and despair, but this attempt to comfort. And this is an image of Martha McDonald, who's here right now, of her work. She's going to be giving a lecture tonight at 7 p.m., which we're very excited about. Mortality and loss dwell side by side with uncommon beauty in the work of Martha McDonald. This piece seen here, titled The Weeping Dress, is a crepe paper garment, hand-sewed and dyed according to Victorian mourning rituals. And it provides a remarkable glimpse into the first year of a widow's bereavement process of that era. The ominous presence of mortality interwoven with grace and frailty is also discernible in the obsessive hair filigree featured here by Carson Fox. Utilizing lace making's decorative craft, employing hair as unconventional material, this indulgent work draws inspiration, again, from Victorian hair sculpture and jewelry, as seen in my slides previously. And they served as a souvenir of deceased loved ones. Carson states, while the elaborate patterning in these works may soothe, the materials impart a sense of dread and mourning. Quote, these remind the viewer that although an actual wound will heal with time, the permanency of loss will continue to surface. Here's an image up close of Martha's work. And this is part of a performance that she did, which will also be on view in the gallery on a video monitor. Dario Robleto's work awakens traditional 19th century mid-domestic handcrafts, bestowing his forms as handcrafted objects cast across centuries from poignant materials such as memento letters between sweethearts, dissolved audio tape recordings, ash, and lace from a Civil War era mourning dress. This is one of his prints, a diptych, titled The First Time the Heart. And it summons Carl von Wiederoth's invention of the sphygmograph. The resulting data illuminates the vitality of the heart's first pulse, and then when absent, the finality of the breath as resolute and cyclic. These fugitive portraits of life as manifested in the ephemeral material of soot reveal also the vestige of a soul on the verge of surfacing from the depths of darkness. And then in Oscar Munez's work, I'm going to go back to that, my apologies. He addresses similar themes of vulnerability and loss. And this is a video which will be on view in the gallery. Lalignia del Dostino, the artist observes as his face, reflected in a pool of water within his hand, seeps between his fingers and slowly dissolves. His quiet, sparse images drift along a path of cessation, allowing the viewer only a trace of an image. And as Keats' headstone narrates, perhaps all our names are writ in water. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. This is a work by Piper Shepard, which is hand-cut lace, which is also wonderful. Again, the idea of devotion and working by hand. And these are Victorian morning flowers, and their shadows are cast upon the wall. Ann Wilson's work also provides a wonderful meditation on loss. These are found textiles, linens that had holes or stains in them, and she repairs that with human hair with specific stitching and embroidery patterns. And there's a triptych that are on view in the gallery. These are works by Marcus Hansen. These are silkscreen on glass that are then flocked with dust. And again, Rosemary Lang. So I'm going to end here. This is a piece by Anders Cresar. And one of the significant things that I think the exhibition does is it positions corporal terrain as an emotionally compelling medium, able to chronicle the external registration of trauma on the body as a visual record of lived experience. And that's most seen here in the work of Anders Cresar portrait, The Birth of Us, Boy. Here, hands mark the surface of a small and fragile torso, imprinting upon its surface the physical remains of an unforeseen woe. In this manner, both of the exhibitions, this show and the Louise Bourgeois exhibition titled The Labor of Remembrance, articulate the significance of histories as embedded in materiality: soot, hair, textiles, lace, dust, and again, the physical body. The cross-discipline innovative works presented in conversation between the two galleries assert and reveal that artistic process, engagement with material, and hand making are critically significant to content and contribute unfailingly to the final object or artwork produced. As such, labor and craft are palpable and converging, possessing an ability to serve as a catalyst to transform one's relationship with physical and emotional discomfort, as well as revealing how we recall the past. And speaking of that, with the anniversary of, the 20th anniversary of 9/11 coming up, I hope that this, again, will summon viewers to mournfully reflect on unbearable suffering, both individual and collective, and the frailty of the human condition, which I think we've all seen in full force over the past 2 years. I did just want to end with a quote here that I saved an article on September 11th, 2011 from the New York Times. And I just feel like it offers a visceral contemplation on anguish, abandon, bereavement, and memory, and also temporality. It was an article by Dan Barry titled "What We Kept: The Mundane Relics of September 11th. Scraps of paper, shreds of cloth, bits of stone help us to remember what we cannot forget." Here's the quote. "In the aftermath of September 11th, people everywhere did what people do in disaster's fresh wake. We wept, prayed, raged, cowered, gathered, hid, drank, questioned, comforted, and sought comfort. We also saved things, also little things, and often for reasons just beyond the full grasp of articulation. Now, a decade later, many of us still keep these mundane items, which timing and circumstance have forged into artifacts approaching the sacred. They return us instantly to a moment we have no desire to revisit, but are determined not to forget." And I think that currently, 10 years later, with additional moments of suffering shared, these sentiments expressed in his article remain enduring. I hope to see all of you at the exhibition. The opening is on Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. The shows will be on view in both of the museum galleries through December 11th. I also encourage you to take full advantage of the exceptional programming that my staff and I have worked on surrounding the exhibitions. For more information, you can go to our website. And thank you so much.